Christmas from the NFL Network. uh, Hello, everybody. Merry Christmas Eve to you, and welcome to this special Tuesday edition of the NFL Network. And obviously, we're going out on Tuesday because tomorrow is Christmas, and we have two Christmas Day NFL games that we'll get to in just a little bit here. We'll delve into that. We'll also delve into the predictions for this week, as well as the weekly path to the playoffs segment. But of course, it is Christmas Eve. Tomorrow, of course, is Christmas, and I'm getting ready, man. I've got my Steelers Santa hat on while I'm doing this, and if you think I'm kidding, take a look at this. Yeah, see? Got my Steelers Santa hat on. I actually bought this at Kmart a couple of years ago when they were still open. But I'm festive. I'm ready to go, despite what's going to probably happen tomorrow to this team. But yeah, I've got my Santa hat on. I've got my elf shirt, son of a nutcracker with Will Ferrell on there. I'm pumped and I'm ready to go. But before we get to the Christmas festivities, of course, we've got our 3 segments to cover here on this particular show. But let's go ahead and just get to it. And I want to save the path to the playoffs till the end because we're getting close to the end of the regular season. And my predictions will deeply impact what I think will happen in Week 18 in terms of who's in what position in terms of playoff positioning, who needs to still get in, so on and so forth. So we'll save that for the very end. But before we do that, and before we get to the predictions, let's get to the power rankings, which many of you are going to be seeing first, because I forgot to put these up earlier today. I usually put them up on the day after the last game of the week, and just, of course, Christmas Eve, things are very busy around here. I didn't get enough time to get this out there before I did this week's show. So let's take a look at the power rankings here. And as you can see, we have a top 5 here that features some familiar faces and some faces back in older places. But start with number 5 on here. God damn it, Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens. Yeah, you guys they're finally brought in here because, yeah, they dominated the Steelers on Saturday and probably had their best overall game, both on offense and defense. The defense has been the biggest caveat for the Ravens all season long. But apparently, beating the hell out of New York the week before was enough to get them ready for this game against the Steelers because they completely dismantled the Steelers in that game. Well, technically, it was mostly what Russell Wilson was doing because he was part of critical fumbles. And the Ravens basically on offense were able to get the ball back when the Steelers got them to fumble the football. But yeah, they're 5 on this list, and they're getting hot at the right time, which is very, very dangerous, especially for the Steelers, considering that the Ravens literally will not don't have to do as much heavy lifting as the Steelers do in order to keep that number 1 spot in the AFC North up there. And yeah, it's not looking good for them. It's not looking good for the Steelers. It's looking good for the Ravens, though. But then again, they have been very underwhelming in the playoffs. Does that change this year? We'll wait to see what happens. But number 4 on the list, the Green Bay Packers, who dominated once again, granted against a really bad New Orleans Saints team, that just completely crumpled last night on Monday Night Football. But even then, even with all that said, the Green Bay Packers still look really damn good. I mean, they're dominating offensively, defensively. They're doing what they need to do. They got in the playoffs yesterday, so they are in. And we're gonna have 3 NFC North teams in the postseason for the first time in a long, long time. So, number 3 on the list, last week's number 1, the Buffalo Bills, who dominated the Lions the week before, but came out really slow against the New England Patriots, who are not a good football team, despite Drake May doing his best to hold that team together. But yeah, it got scary for a little bit there. But Buffalo did persevere; they did come back and win the game, and yeah, their positioning is still very much there to possibly be the number 1 seed. But they have to hope the number 2 team on my list here loses, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs. And considering what happened this past Saturday when this Chiefs team that has had a lot of problems offensively and defensively played their best game of the season. I mean, when they scored more than 2 touchdowns. They had more of a 2-touchdown lead this time around. That's the first time that's happened all season long. I still think this is the worst 14-1 team in NFL in history, but I'm going to explain later on why I'm more upset about this, and it relates to the Steelers, who they will play tomorrow, but we'll delve into that once we get to the predictions, because, yeah, I need to rant about what's going on with my hometown team. But back up at the number one spot this weekend, it's the Detroit Lions. And considering that all the injuries that they have right now on defense, the offense is still clicking very much, even without somebody like David Montgomery there. The knuckles to Jalen Gibbs, Jahmyr Gibbs' Sonic, but they are finding ways to win games. They were literally trolling the Bears on Sunday with plays like that fake fumble play that led to the touchdown. Like they knew that they were screwing around with them, and if they could keep that up and keep this momentum going, they're gonna be the one seed, no question about it. But Minnesota is creeping up behind them, so they can't push the pedal off anytime soon. So, but will that change this week? Will there be a new number one team once we get to the week 17? Well, let's go ahead and find out. Let's get to the predictions for week 17. And in terms of my predictions this week, I actually did pretty well. I only got 3 wrong. Technically, I was 12-16 because one of them was a tie, and I gave myself the point for that. I gave myself the point because I just couldn't decide which bad team I thought was going to win more. And if you go on to my ESPN pigskin thing, I actually predicted the Jaguars would win just based on the record, and of course the Raiders won that game. But yeah, so technically it's 12-16, but I'm considering the tie as an extra point. I consider the tie as an extra point. So 13 out of 16. My best overall week. I mean, that's the best week I've had so far. I think it's becoming clearer who's going to win these games, and there's very few surprises left in the rest of the regular season, especially for the next 2 weeks in mind. But such is the case for the first game that's going to kick off the Week 17 schedule, and that is on Christmas Day, the first game of the Christmas Day doubleheader, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Of course, like I said before, the Chiefs are getting hot at the right time. They are playing they played their best game of the season last week. They're scoring they're winning by more than one possession, but this is it's looking likely that the Kansas City Chiefs will eventually get the 1 seed. They'll probably lose a game, this one or the next one, depending on if Denver really does collapse on Saturday, when they have literally had an opportunity to secure their playoff positioning. But let's talk about the home team, because, oh boy, the friggin' Pittsburgh Steelers, man. The friggin' Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, don't get me wrong. I knew that they were going to lose to Baltimore. But the moment that I knew there was no hope for this team, it wasn't with the Russell Wilson fumble, it wasn't the pick six, it was early in the game when the Steelers defense forced 3 fumbles and the Ravens got every single one of them back. The special team fumble, they got back. The 2 fumbles that Lamar Jackson had in the first quarter, got those back. And at that point, I was just like, okay, I've seen this movie before. I know exactly what's going to happen. And sure enough, the Ravens completely decimated whatever hope was left for the Steelers at this point. Like, the Eagles game, okay, you can make the argument that they hadn't won in 60 years, that there was really likely no chance they were going to go in there and win it now. But I thought that the idea of, clinching the AFC North, ending the conversation right there. You didn't have to worry about the Ravens creeping up on you or the Bengals winning out, and all you had to do was just win the game and you had a chance. But just like the Denver Broncos on Thursday night, they couldn't finish the job. And now they are in danger of literally limping into the playoffs once again and just collapsing into late December for the 6th consecutive year. 6 years now they have done this. All the way back to 2018. 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. Last year, granted they had that 3-game winning streak once they put Mason Rudolph in there, but still, they still limped into the playoffs and got their ass handed to them by Buffalo. And now it's going to happen again. I am literally not convinced that this team is ever going to win another game this season. And at this point, when is the ball going to drop for the Steelers? Like, I get it. The Steelers don't fire coaches that often, but you know what? Chicago just fired their coach for the first time in season for the first time in 100 years. They had never done that before in their history, and 100 years that the Bears have been in existence, and that's the first time getting rid of Matt Eberflus was the first time they ever got rid of a head coach in the middle of the season. And I get it, the Steelers don't usually do that. They let guys like Chuck Noll and Bill Cowher retire on their own terms, but I'm sorry, after 6 years of this, and now it's going on 7 years. I guess I should say, like, when is the ball going to drop? When is somebody in the organization going to realize, Mike Tomlin may not be the guy that we think he is anymore? Yeah, he got us the Super Bowl back then, and I'm not going to say it was because of Cowher's guys. I mean, that's the argument you can make there, but they haven't won a playoff game in nearly 8 years. 8 years it's been since they've won a playoff game. And I'm sorry, you can't find success if you can't get out of the first round of the playoffs. And Jacksonville humiliated them, Cleveland humiliated them, Kansas City humiliated them, Buffalo humiliated them. Who's going to humiliate them this time around? Is it going to be the Texans? Even though the Texans are not very good, I'd put money on the Texans right now because of just how much the Steelers are just like it really comes to is the loss last week. Yeah, I'll put the blame a little bit on Russell Wilson for the fumble when he had the first down. He should have just gone down, but no, he had to go for the end zone, and then of course he threw the pick six. You can make that argument as much as you want to. You can make the argument about the defense losing the game, but here's the thing that really just made me realize that Mike Tomlin doesn't care about anything else about those except that stupid non-losing season record, and it's because with 9 minutes, I think it was 9 minutes and 30 seconds to go. About that, they're down by 2 touchdowns, and instead of going for it and trying to win the game, they punt the ball away to the Ravens, which wouldn't be a big deal, except they did that last week, and Philadelphia ran all over them in the fourth quarter, and they never got the ball back, and the game ended. Guess what happened with the Ravens? They ran the ball. They got first downs. Steelers never got the ball back. Yeah. The fact that 2 weeks in a row he does this, I don't know what strategy he thinks that's going to do. Like he thinks this defense is so much bit more important than it is. It's like the defense is the heart of the Steelers. Don't get me wrong, but if after 2 weeks you do the same thing again over and over again and it doesn't work, maybe that should give you an indication that you should stop doing it. Like if that's their strategy for trying to win the game when you're down 2 touchdowns, let me just remind you of what I said before. It doesn't work! It doesn't fucking work. It doesn't work if you're giving the ball back to a team that has 2 of the best running backs this season in Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. If you give them the ball back with 9 minutes to go, and you know they have the Ravens and the Eagles are notoriously known for running the football and finding ways to finish the games, you are literally raising the white flag. Like, I'm really convinced that Mike Tomlin doesn't care about getting another Super Bowl at this point. And I know some of you might be over-exaggerating, but I'm sorry. After watching this for the last 8 years now, this year just irks me so much because, hey, he's got that non-losing season record. That's it for him. Doesn't care about winning don't care about making a deep playoff run. Don't care about winning a Super Bowl per se. Like, and I'm saying this because I want to be proven wrong. I want this Steelers team to realize their true potential and actually try to go deep in the playoffs. But unfortunately, that's not happening anytime soon because this team is just so stuck in 2009 that they think that they can play their game while everyone else is in the modern NFL and it will work out for them. It hasn't worked. It's not going to work if you keep doing this every single week. And at some point, somebody at that front office, one of the Rooneys, has to get up and say, hey, enough of this bullshit. Enough of this bullshit. We need to fix this problem. And if it means getting rid of Mike Tomlin, then so be it. Everyone's just like, well, if Mike Tomlin goes somewhere else, he'll find more success. Okay, let him go somewhere else. Let the Steelers get somebody who can come in here and fix this team in general and help them adapt to the new era of the NFL. Because they're not winning football when the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bills, the Lions all play their own style of football that has worked out in their favor because they've adapted to the modern NFL. The Steelers can't adapt to the modern NFL in their current position right now. And it's just, it hurts me the most because it's Christmas time. This is supposed to be the happiest time of the year. And every time I see the Steelers play a game where they should win it or should be in the playoff positioning and they find ways to lose games, it just makes me more depressed than I need to be. Like, that's the worst part about this whole thing. I'm like Robert De Niro in Silver Linings Playbook. I'm superstitious as fuck when it comes to my football team. Like, certain things need to happen in my world to make me think that the Steelers are gonna turn it around. And this isn't a movie. This is real life, and in real life, the Steelers just aren't that good. Plain and simple. And if anybody out there thinks that the Kansas City Chiefs are gonna go win this game and lose it, they're out of their minds. Like, they're out of their minds, because here's the worst thing about this entire thing, and I just finally put it together this week. You know why the Kansas City Chiefs are the worst 14-1 team the worst 14-1 team in NFL in the NFL right now? You know why I hate the Chiefs now more than ever? Because they're winning ugly games the way the Steelers did. And they're getting more praise for it because they're playing so ugly. And the Steelers were doing it, and everyone just brushes it aside like it's nothing. The fact that the Chiefs perfected the formula that the Steelers have had for years now just sickens me to no end whatsoever. And it just baffles me. Like, how much longer is this team going to keep doing this? Are we really going to have to wait another 30 years for a transcendent quarterback or a head coach to come in here and turn this team around? Because that's what it's looking like right now. We haven't even begun the worst era of this team. That we haven't gone through that capsule between the time of Terry Bradshaw and the Steelers of the 70s to when Bill Cowher came in or Ben Roethlisberger came in and really turned the team around and Mike Tomlin came in. We're still many years away from that. And I'm saying this all because that's just how I feel right now. And if the Steelers are listening out there, which they may not, they probably are, they probably not. More than likely they're not. This is your chance to prove me wrong. This is your chance to win the next 2 games, make a deep run in the playoffs, maybe get to a Super Bowl. Prove me wrong. Prove that the last 8 years were not just were just a fluke. They're not what you are now. Just something. Just give me something to be excited about with this football team, because right now there's nothing to get really happy about per se with this team. And yeah, like if I have to choose between who wins this game and who is, I'm going with the Chiefs. I'm going with the Chiefs to win this one. I think the Chiefs will have the Steeler formula in this game. They'll ugly win this one. They'll make the Steelers look even worse than they are right now. I just don't have a good feeling about this game per se. So after all that ranting, give me the Chiefs to go to 15-1 and the Steelers to drop to 10-6. Merry fucking Christmas, everybody. And I know I'm sorry for venting and swearing and all that, but I'm sorry. Ever since that Ravens-Steelers game on Saturday, I just had to get that out there. And, yeah, you can understand you gotta understand my frustration, because this has been going on for nearly 10 years now, and I'm just sick and tired of it. Speaking of the Ravens, let's talk about the other game that probably will not be any better than the Chiefs and Steelers game. It's the Ravens and the Texans. The Texans got embarrassed by Kansas City. I mean, they had opportunities, and then Tank Dell had that bad-looking injury, and Texans just folded after that. I mean, just like the Steelers, they waved the white flag, and it's just like, we're going to coast it. We're going to limp into the playoffs because, yeah, the Texans really are not that good of a football team right now. They aren't the team that they were at the start of the season, and yeah, they've really fallen apart since the middle of the season. But they're going to take on the Baltimore Ravens, who, as I said before, they're in position right now to usurp the Steelers for the AFC North title once again, like what happened 6 years ago, when the Steelers were leading for much of the season, and then in December they fell apart, and the Ravens just kept winning games and took over. Like, more than likely that's going to happen here, and there's nothing that makes me think that the Texans can host the Ravens and they come out the winners here. I just don't see how this dilapidated Houston Texans team really is going to do much. If I'm choosing between Joe Mixon of the Texans or Derrick Henry of the Ravens to run the ball and keep the other team off the field, Derrick Henry's the one to go to. I mean, like, it's just nothing about this game really feels like it should be anything exciting or anything intriguing whatsoever. Like, I mean, it just doesn't feel like a game that really amounts to anything that amazing. Like, there's a whole thing going on right now about Lamar Jackson saying, I'm thinking about watching the halftime game with Beyonce Knowles, because Beyonce's doing the halftime show in Houston, and it's just like, people are getting kind of upset about that, him saying that. But you know what? Considering how bad the Texans are right now, Ravens probably should just go ahead and dominate in the first half and then just watch the Beyonce halftime show, and they'll probably still win the game, because I don't see anything of noteworthiness with the Houston Texans that makes me believe that they're going to pull off this win here. And I'm just not feeling optimistic about this game whatsoever. I think the Baltimore Ravens go into this one and win, and I think they beat the Texans easily. Give me the Ravens to go to 11-5 and the Texans to drop to 9-7. So then we have a Thursday Night Football showdown between the Seattle Seahawks and the Chicago Bears. The Bears are just waiting for the season to be over. They really have had nothing to really be happy about whatsoever. Yeah, they got rid of their head coach, but they've somehow gotten even worse than that. They haven't won a game since the Washington game. Just think about that. And the Seahawks, they're limping along too. They're trying to hold on and maybe get back into the contention for the NFC West. But right now, the Rams are pretty much in the driver's seat for them right now. Seahawks did show a little bit of promise though against the Vikings. They almost won that game, but Geno Smith throws a pick at the end of the game, and that's pretty much sealed it up. But neither one of these teams looks really that great per se, but the Seahawks are still trying to do whatever they can to win the division, and I think it will come down to the Rams and Seahawks in a Week 18 primetime matchup to determine who's going to win the NFC West. And I'm going to go with the Seahawks to win this one, not really for any particular reason, just because I think they are going to win it easily, because it's not really that good of a football team that they're going up against. So give me the Seahawks to go to 9-7 and the Bears to drop to 4-12. So then we got a Saturday triple header with a lot of playoff implications on the line for all three teams. Shut up notifications on Facebook. That's my Facebook notifications, by the way, if you hear like the little dinging there. I'm reading off my predictions from Facebook, so. But anyway, the first game of the triple header, we've got the Los Angeles Chargers over the New England Patriots. And the Los Angeles Chargers, hey, I gave you guys no hope to win on Thursday, but the fact that you found this old rule and you actually put it to use, like, a lot of people had no idea what the hell they were even doing with the free kick thing, and once that happened, the momentum in that game just changed. The Denver Broncos looked like they were going to easily clinch a playoff spot in that game, but unfortunately, the Chargers, after that free kick, just took over the game, and they are in prime position to get into the playoffs, much better position than they were this time last week. But and they're going up against a New England team that showed a little brief flashes of promise, like I said, against Buffalo last week. But Buffalo came back and won that game easily. I still think Drake May is the future for the Patriots. They just got to get a team around him to work with, and I don't think anything is going to be too significant in this one to say that the Chargers will probably go into this game and beat them and probably clinch a playoff berth, because that's what happens here. If the Chargers win, they're in the playoffs. So, and if they could do more of what they did on Thursday night, this team could be very interesting to watch in the postseason. So, give me the Chargers to go to 10-6 and the Patriots to drop to 3-13. Following that, we've got the Denver Broncos and the Cincinnati Bengals, who in the last 10 years, when you really look back on it, these two are usually meeting up in a matchup that determines playoff positioning. I think in 2014, the Cincinnati Bengals had to win to get to the playoffs in a Monday night game against Peyton Manning's Broncos. And then the year after that, when it was the backup quarterbacks for both the Broncos and the Bengals. The Broncos had to win to get into the playoffs, and they did. And now, almost 10 years later, they're back at it again with major playoff implications on the line. And Denver, clear opportunity to clinch the playoffs for the first time since Peyton Manning took you to the Super Bowl, and you just couldn't do the job. You couldn't seal the deal. And now it's going to probably hurt them in the long run because like I said before with the Chargers, after that free kick happened, the Broncos just fell apart after that. They were baffled that that was even a rule that they could that could be done legally, and yeah, I'm getting flashes of 2008 when I look at the Denver Broncos because remember in 2008, the Denver Broncos were looking like they were primed and ready to go for the playoffs in 2008. I think they were at one point 8-5, and they just had to win one more game. They had to win one. I think they had to win one more game to finish the season and get to finish the season in the playoffs. And they lose to Carolina, they lose to Buffalo, and then on Monday night they get trounced by the San Diego Chargers for 52-21, and that knocked them out of the playoffs and put the Chargers in by comparison, who were also 8-8. An 8-8 team won that division in 2008. Now different scenarios here, but they're going up against the Cincinnati Bengals, who have been really red hot in the month of December. And who would have thought that this team that was really really bad in the first half of the season, which they've been known to start really slow in the month of September and then get it going later on in the season. And this is probably one of the best coaching jobs Zach Taylor has done. It definitely has kept his job security in check. And Joe Burrow's just bailing out, man. Like, if the Bengals make the playoffs, which they've got a really good chance to do so, I mean, all bets are off on where this team could go if they make a deep playoff run here. I think Joe Burrow ends up being the MVP of the league for getting this team to that point in general. But yeah, the Bengals still have a lot to play for. So do the Denver Broncos. A very close game in between. But if I'm going to pick the team that has the best chance of winning, I'm actually going with the Cincinnati Bengals just because of how well they've done ever since they lost to the Steelers at the beginning of the month. They've played really solid games. They know that they have to keep winning to keep even a threat of hope of the playoffs alive, and they have to hope that Indianapolis and Miami lose, which it's going to come down to Week 18. It's going to come down to the wire to see who's going to be the odd man out. But I think in this case, I think the Cincinnati Bengals have the best opportunity to win this game. I think if Denver gets eliminated from postseason contention, if they don't win this game. I don't know if that's true or not. I have to check with the playoff implications at the end of the show when we do the path of the playoffs. But regardless, this is still a big game for both teams. But if I'm going to choose the one that I think has the best chance of going in and winning, I'm taking the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm taking the Bengals to win this one to go to 8-8. The Broncos to drop to 9-7. And then finally, for Saturday's tripleheader, we have the Arizona Cardinals is going to Los Angeles to take on the Rams. Cardinals blew an opportunity to continue their playoff hopes. They got eliminated with the loss to Carolina, and the Rams winning against the Jets on Sunday. And so now the Rams the Rams coming off of that big win against the Jets host the Cardinals, still in prime position for the division. And I think if they win this game, they do seal the division. So this is a critical game. With this and a Seattle loss, I should say. If Seattle loses on Thursday, and the Rams could win on Saturday just by winning the game. And I mean, right now the Rams, kind of like with the Bengals, started off really slow. They didn't get going until halfway through the season when they got all their players back, and they've been one of the hottest teams in the league so far. Coming off of that slow start, they've really come on their own. And hey, they got a touchdown last week, so it's better than the week what they had before with the 49ers. But in terms of which team I think is the best right now, the Rams, I think, are easily in the better position. The Cardinals, just the most frustrating team this season because they've shown those brief flashes of promise of what they could be. That the end of 2023 was the sign that maybe things were going to get better this season. I had them predicted as probably a sleeper playoff pick, but unfortunately it hasn't been the case for them, and now they're officially out. So what else do they really have to play for except to be spoilers for whoever they play next? So maybe this is a game that they try to win, but for pride. But I think the Rams are going to overplay the Cardinals in this one and win this one easily. I think they get one step closer to clinching the NFC West, which leads to a very interesting Week 18 matchup coming up for them because the Rams will play the Seahawks. So give me the Rams to go to 10-6 and the Cardinals to drop to 7-9. And then there's the Sunday slate, and boy, does this slate really, really suck. There is not a lot of interesting games going on in here. Games that could easily be lopsided, and let's just go ahead and just run to these real quickly. And I think it's really not. I think when you see the teams that are going to be playing on Sunday, it's not going to be that hard to see which ones I think are going to win. But let's start with the Giants hosting the Indianapolis Colts. The Giants currently locked into the number one draft pick in the upcoming draft, and I think if they lose this game, they do secure the number one pick in the draft. So they'll have the choice of whoever they want to take, assuming they don't fuck up their own tank. But the Colts still in playoff contention, still trying to keep their playoff hopes alive, and one loss and they're eliminated. And the Colts, kind of like with the Cardinals, have shown brief flashes of promise, but the last couple of weeks have definitely shown that they are indeed still in the playoff hunt. Obviously, they're still in the playoff hunt and show flashes of promise. Even though they got quite a scare from the Tennessee Titans last week. When you're up 38-7, and then the Titans just come back and put 30 on you and almost have a chance to win the game, that should be a cause for concern. But they're going up against a Giants team that just wants the season to be over with. So no surprise here. Give me the Colts to go over 8-8 and keep their playoff hopes alive. The Giants 2-14. So next up, we have the Jets hosting the Bills. Of course, on a Monday night early in October, the Jets lost to the Bills, and that led to the Aaron Rodgers, and that led to the Jets basically getting Devontae Adams after that. But Jets have struggled badly. They had another bad game against the Rams. Bills struggled at first, but they found their way back. Bills are still very much in contention for the 1 seed, although I think if Kansas City wins on Wednesday, Kansas City locks up the 1 seed. So either way, Buffalo. No matter how good Buffalo does, Kansas City will still probably end up with a 1 seed. But Buffalo still has a lot to play for overall. But I really don't think they're going to let the Jets come into their house and then beat them. One would think, but then again, keep in mind, if the Chiefs win on Wednesday, they win the 1 seed. So maybe Buffalo won't have much to play for afterwards. But for the time being, I am going to say the Bills will win this one. I don't think it's going to be close at all. I think the Bills are just a better team in general. And even without the starters in there for the most part, because there might not be nothing left to play for at that point, I'm going with the Buffalo Bills to go to 13-3 and the Jets to drop to 4-12. Now we get to some crappy games. Let's start with the Raiders at the Saints. The Saints, that was rough yesterday. Games like what we had last night on Monday Night Football are the reason why they allowed flexing in Monday Night Football, so we don't have games like that. That game should have not been played on a Monday night. That should have been a game that should have been a Thursday night game or a game at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday. That should not have been the marquee Monday Night Football matchup. That was just a mess of a disaster. Mostly for the Saints, who are just... I have no idea what they are right now. They are just such a clusterfuck right now. And, the way they played last night was just ugly, ugly mess. And then you have the Raiders, who, hey, they don't care if they fucked up their tank. They're happy. And, they still got a chance to get a quarterback if they need to get is a quarterback, because there'll still be one available. And I would not be shocked at all if they still manage to somehow get Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward at that point, or Dylan Gabriel, whoever the top quarterback's going to be in this draft class. But I think Antonio Pierce will get at least one more season with the new QB, and if it doesn't work, you just let him go after that. But in terms of this game in particular, I really don't know who's going to win this game, and not really. This is one of those ones where it's just like I'm putting my tie rule in here. I have no idea who I'm going to pick for this one because both of these teams suck. They're just waiting for the season to be over. And yeah, so I have a tie for this one. Raiders 3-12-1, Saints 5-10-1. No matter what happens, I get a point, so a win for me. So following that, we've got the Carolina Panthers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Carolina getting that big overtime win against Arizona, really having nothing to play for but playing spoiler to the Cardinals. Could they do it again against Tampa Bay, who pretty much had the NFC South in their hands, and they let Dallas just completely run all over them, and they looked absolutely horrible against the Cowboys. I mean, it doesn't help when Tampa Bay's best weapons are not being utilized more than they should. for much of that game, it just felt like the Cowboys had more control. The Buccaneers Baker Mayfield was just throwing like these little passes here and there. It's just like, this isn't the Buccaneers team that was working so well beforehand. It's just like, what are you doing? And then, of course, the fumble that ends the game. Rachaad White trying way too much to just. All you had to do was just get the first down. You had the timeout. You had an opportunity to win the game with a field goal, and you have the ball stripped from you, and the game ends there. And now the Falcons have the lead in the NFC South, which we'll talk about them in just a little bit. But yeah, I think Tampa Bay may have blown that opportunity that they had to really secure the NFC South once again. But I am going to pick them to win this one. I think Carolina could play spoiler once again to them, and I think a loss here really would hurt Tampa Bay's chances of winning, especially with Atlanta having the tiebreaker over the Buccaneers. But I am going to pick the Buccaneers to win this one. I think they do win this one to go to 9-7, and the Panthers drop to 4-12. And back to some crappy games again. We've got the Tennessee Titans taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars got their ass handed to them by the Raiders, and they're just waiting for the season to be over with. The Titans made it a close game against the Colts in the fourth quarter. I mean, they were down 38-7 and scored 23 unanswered points, and nearly made it a game. So there is some life to the Titans after all. And Mason Rudolph didn't quite save Christmas like he did last year for the Steelers, but he at least gave them more of an opportunity than I think Will Levis did. But like I said, these two teams suck. They're just waiting for the season to end. Neither one of these teams is really that good to begin with. If I had to pick a winner, I'd probably say Jacksonville, but I'm putting my tiebreaker rule on here because I just don't think neither one of these teams are that good, and they're just so banged up with injuries and so clustered about what their futures are. I'm putting my tie rule again in this one. So the Titans and Jaguars tie. Titans go to 3-12-1. Jaguars go to 3-12-1. So not a lot of good games in the 1 o'clock window. The 4:30 window, though, has some games with some intrigue to them, starting with the Dallas Cowboys taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles lost a big game against Washington that they had control of. Devontae Smith catches that catch from Kenny Pickett. The game's over, and Washington never sees the ball again, but he drops it, and then Jaden Daniels does what Jaden Daniels does so much, and the Eagles lose their first game since September, and they've been on that hot streak that they had, and we don't know the future of what Jalen Hurts is going to be like if he's ready to come back for that game in particular. And he tried to come back in that game against Washington, but of course they wouldn't let him back in for obvious reasons because he was in the concussion protocol, and so it just really depends on what happens with the concussion protocol thing. But keep in mind also Kenny Pickett's also injured too, the backup QB, and of course he's got rib injuries, and of course he was a former Steeler, but the rib injury might be a big deal. I can't remember who their backup quarterback is. I think it's Tanner McGee. And if the Eagles are going into this game with Tanner McGee, ordinarily I would say it's not a good sign going forward, but Tanner McGee really would not have to do much. It's just like, okay, Saquon, it's your show, man. Go at it. But then again, they didn't even do that. They couldn't even do that last week against Washington. When I really think about it, I don't think Saquon Barkley did that much after the first half, if I remember correctly. But they're going up against the Cowboys, who, despite losing out of the playoffs, they're eliminated from playoff contention. They're still winning games. They've been playing pretty good with Cooper Rush as the quarterback. And just like with Zach Taylor, Mike McCarthy pretty much has sealed his future with the Cowboys. They're not going to get rid of him. So, hey, Jerry Jones, maybe Jerry Jones should actually go all in this time around, and maybe they actually have something for next year. Just saying. But the fact that the Eagles are so banged up right now with Jalen Hurts not in the picture, I think it gives the Cowboys an opportunity to go in there and pull a shocking upset here. And they've been playing pretty good the last couple of weeks. And, you beat a Buccaneers team that was leading the division. All bets are off of what could happen here. And I think the Cowboys go into this game. They go into Philadelphia. And are they going into Philadelphia, or did they already go to Philadelphia? Okay, they do go into Philadelphia. And I said it was a 4:30 game on Sunday. It's a 1 o'clock game on Sunday for the Cowboys and Eagles. But I think they do go into Lincoln Financial Field and find a way to beat the Eagles. I think they find a way to win. and pull off a major upset here. I'm going with the Cowboys to go to 8-8 and the Eagles to drop to 12-4. Following that, we do have a late afternoon game with the Miami Dolphins and the Cleveland Browns. The Browns, kind of like with a lot of the teams that have the same record as them, they're just waiting for the season to be over with. There's literally nothing left in the tank for them. But the Miami Dolphins are still very much in the playoff hunt. They need to win out and hope that the Colts lose, because I think if the Colts lose, I think they have the upper hand over the Bengals. If the Colts lose, they put themselves in a better position to get in. If Denver loses out, they're going to be in. And I was originally going to pick the Cleveland Browns for this game because I thought that it's late, it's December, it's wintertime, and of course, if last month's game against the Packers was any indication, the Dolphins can't win in games under 40 degrees. But the weather is actually going to be very warm for the game for this time of the year, around the 50s. So you're saying there's a chance. And I think Miami's the better team in this matchup. I'm going to take the Dolphins to win this one. Give me the Dolphins to go to 8-8 and the Browns to drop to 3-13. And then we get probably the most intriguing matchup on Sunday afternoon, and that is the Green Bay Packers taking on the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings eked out a win against Seattle, showed a lot of vulnerability in that game that the Packers can use in their favor. Of course, the Packers and Vikings already played in the season. The Vikings won that game easily, and the Green Bay Packers go into this game and feeling really good about themselves. They beat a really good Seattle team. They decimated a bad Saints team. And division games can always be a major toss-up. Records aside, these two teams don't like each other, and yeah, there's going to be a lot of bad blood in this game on so many levels. And I think Green Bay has the upper hand here. They want revenge for the Minnesota Vikings, and I feel like that's going to happen in this particular matchup. I think Green Bay goes into this game and completely gives the Minnesota Vikings a taste of their own medicine. I think they'll make it close though, but I think the Packers do have the upper hand here. They're thinking of pulling the upset here, stopping the Minnesota Vikings from gaining any traction, and maybe helping out their little brother on the side with the Detroit Lions. But I'm going with the Green Bay Packers to win this one. I'm going to take them to go to 12-4, and Minnesota to drop to 13-3. And then we've got the Sunday Night Football matchup, the Washington Commanders hosting the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons finally got rid of Kirk Cousins, and maybe for good, because there's rumors that they're going to get rid of him after one season, making this possibly one of the worst free agent signings in the NFL in recent NFL history, because they signed him to a 4-year deal. But they realize that the Falcons now realize this guy's not any good. But they put in Michael Penix in against the Giants, which then again it's the New York Giants, but played a good game. Not the best game overall, not a great start overall, but it's a step in the right direction. And I think if he goes into this game, he's got an opportunity to take this team into the postseason. And maybe it's because right now this is feeling like the Joe Flacco, Lamar Jackson experiment back in 2018 with the Ravens, when Joe Flacco was leading for most of the season, and then they put Lamar in, and then of course the tide changes for the Ravens, and they win the division. They get into the playoffs, and all bets are off at that point. Of course, they lose to the Chargers, but look what happened the next season with Lamar Jackson taking over as the starter. That feels like something that could happen with Michael Penix Jr. I mean, if he takes that next step in these next couple of games, I think the Falcons have to make the decision to go with him going forward. But they're going to face a really good Washington Commanders team who really is looking like a dominant team, and Jaden Daniels is the real thing. Like, he's the guy that's turning that team around. But again, you got to play it safe with him. You don't want another RG3 situation to happen where you get him injured and your hopes and dreams go fading out of existence. But to put up a drive at the end of the game to beat the Philadelphia Eagles when they had that game sewn up, I mean, the Commanders still have a lot of life to them. If they win this game, they're in the playoffs. And I think they've got a golden opportunity to do that. They've been very good at home. Jaden Daniels has proven that he is the real deal. And it's going to be a very exciting matchup overall to see these two rookies and seeing what they could do overall. But I think the home team is going to take this one easily. Give me the Commanders to go to 11-5 and the Falcons to drop to 8-8. Which brings us to the Monday Night Football matchup, a rematch of last year's NFC Championship game between the Detroit Lions and the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners eliminated from the playoffs last week after Washington beat Philadelphia. So they literally had nothing to play for against Miami. And even though they did try to come back in that game against Miami, it just wasn't worth it in the end. They ended up losing that game. Brock Purdy throws a pick, and then the Dolphins score a touchdown after that. The Lions, as I said, very banged up on both sides of the field, but they were able to find a way to beat the Bears last week, and they really just decimated them. They were doing trick plays, giving them a taste of what could be coming in the postseason, because I feel like this team right now is in prime position to get to the number one seed in the playoffs. I think they will do it with the Minnesota loss I predict against Green Bay. If they win this game, they are the number one seed. I think it happens here. I think Detroit has a lot more to play for in this game than San Francisco does. Detroit wants to get revenge for what happened last season. I mean, this is a game that they got to have. They got to prove to everybody that they are legitimate. And I think if they win this game with an opportunity to get the number one seed, home field advantage throughout the playoffs, the bye week, everything, it proves that this team is for real, and they're going to be the top contender to be the NFC representative in the Super Bowl this year. So I'm going to take the Lions to win this one, to go to 14-2, and the 49ers to drop to 6-10. And so, with all of that said, here are my predictions once again. The Chiefs over the Steelers, the Ravens over the Texans, the Seahawks over the Bears, the Chargers over the Patriots, the Bengals over the Broncos, the Rams over the Cardinals, the Colts over the Giants, the Bills over the Jets, a tie for the Raiders and Saints, the Buccaneers over the Panthers, a tie for the Titans and Jaguars, the Cowboys over the Eagles, the Dolphins over the Browns, the Packers over the Vikings, the Commanders over the Falcons, and the Lions over the 49ers. And so, with all of that said, it's time for the segment you all love, you all hate, I don't care, I'm doing it anyway. It's the NFL Network's Path to the Playoffs! Once again, I sincerely apologize for that, but I'm doing it. Screw it. The AFC, let's start with them. The Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills, and the Houston Texans have clinched the divisions. Baltimore is the latest team to join the group here in the battle for the AFC North. So let's take a look at that battle for the AFC North, because the Pittsburgh Steelers still have the lead in it right now, but like I said, the Ravens are breathing down their neck, and of course the Steelers have the Chiefs, and then they have the Bengals. 2 home games, which will benefit them, but Kansas City's looking for the 1 seed. Cincinnati is going to try to keep winning until they know they're completely out of it, and it just makes their schedule for the Steelers very, very tough in these final 2 weeks. Meanwhile, for the Baltimore Ravens, they have the upper hand here because they've got the Houston Texans, who have not been the same team they've been the last couple of weeks, and they've struggled mightily. And then they've got the Cleveland Browns, and yeah, Cleveland the Ravens lost to the Browns in Cleveland, but who knows if the Browns are going to have that same juice that they had the year before, if they had the same juice that they had back in October. And again, this is reminiscent of 2018. The Steelers needed the Browns to beat the Ravens to get into the playoffs. Steelers had to beat the Bengals. The Bengals, they beat the Bengals, but the Browns lose to the Ravens, and the Ravens take the division. And I feel like that's going to be history repeating itself this coming season, these coming next 2 weeks. And yeah, it's going to suck. It's just really going to suck here. I think the Steelers will be on the road in the playoffs and probably be one and done, and Baltimore will host whoever is going to be the 6th seed, which right now would be the Los Angeles Chargers, assuming that they do clinch the playoff this week. Chargers, of course, they've got this game coming up, and then they host the Raiders, so they've got a good opportunity to get in. Denver, they've got Cincinnati, they've got Kansas City, which could be very, very tough on them, because Cincinnati could easily beat them. I have them predicting to beat the Broncos. And then if Kansas City somehow loses to Pittsburgh, that Week 18 game becomes extremely important for both the Chiefs and the Broncos, because Chiefs would essentially need to win the game to secure the number 1 seed. Denver needs to win to get into the playoffs. So that would make for a very interesting game that could end up being one of the 4 possible primetime matchups we have going on here next week is for Week 18. But we'll wait to see what happens there. But what about the teams in the hunt? As I mentioned, I've already mentioned the Cincinnati Bengals. After the Miami Dolphins play the Cleveland Browns, their last game of the season, I believe, is going to be against the New York Jets. Right? Yeah, right. It's the New York Jets. So the Dolphins could possibly get to 9-8 if they continue on this path. The Colts, they have a favorable schedule too. They've got the Giants and the Jaguars and two teams that are not very good, two teams that are obviously just waiting for the season to be over with. So let's just go ahead and take a look and see what would happen if the predictions I have this week go through. So let's go to, I'm going to go to Playoff Predictors, which is a really good website if you want to get a grasp of what's going to happen with the playoff picture going forward. So let's go ahead and look at Week 18. Let's assume that the Colts win in Week 18 against Jacksonville. Let's assume that the Dolphins win in Week 18 because they need to win. So let's take a look and see what the AFC playoff picture would look like here. And it looks like the Colts would get in because of the better record. I believe the better record in terms of with teams versus losing records. I think strength of scheduling, strength of victory, type of stuff here. Let's see what what do I have here? The Colts 3-3 in the division, 7-5 in the conference. What about the Dolphins? Let's see what Dolphins would have a better divisional record. The conference record 7-5. I'm trying to see what the difference is between the Colts and the Dolphins, and how the Colts got in, the Dolphins didn't get in. I think it's based on the home record. No, home record's the same. Away record's the same. So from what I'm looking at here, it looks like the Colts have the strength of victory and the strength of schedule over the Miami Dolphins, and that's what would get them in. Cincinnati would not be in. Cincinnati would also be out as well, and the rank according to the playoff predictors page for my picks is that rank is determined by head-to-head tiebreakers. So that's how we get to that situation with the Cincinnati Bengals going into Week 18. So yeah, right now it looks like the Indianapolis Colts, if the season were to end the way I think it's going to end, it looks like the Colts will make it into the postseason as the 7th seed. The Steelers would be the 6th seed. Chargers would move up to the 5 seed. So that would make the Week 18 the wild card matchups like this: Los Angeles at Houston, Pittsburgh at Baltimore, third time they'd be meeting this season, and the Colts and the Bills. So there's that. And let's go ahead and move on over to the NFC now next. Now as we look at the NFC playoff picture, you can see now that we have two teams in the hunt right now. That's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Seattle Seahawks. You can also see that no divisions have been clinched. So everything is still wide open, even though 4 of the 7 slots in the NFC have been officially filled with the Lions, the Eagles, the Vikings, and the Packers. First time in a long time we've had 3 teams from the same division in the NFC, is in the NFC North, I should say, winning a spot in the playoffs. So as you can see, the Los Angeles Rams, the Atlanta Falcons, and the Washington Commanders are in prime position. Essentially, the Rams and Commanders the Commanders, I think, are the only ones in this place right now that are winning in. And then the focus will eventually tie into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Seattle Seahawks, hoping that the Rams and the Falcons can lose a game or two. But right now, let's take a look at the Los Angeles Rams. As we talked about before, the Rams play the Arizona Cardinals on Saturday night. And like I said before, if the Seahawks lose on Thursday to the Chicago Bears, it opens the door for the Rams to go in there and win the division on Saturday night. But we'll wait to see what happens there. But as I said before, man, it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out, especially the NFC South battle between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta has the tiebreaker over Tampa Bay, so that's the one thing they've got going in their favor. But they're going into a tough game on Sunday night against the Commanders, and then they wrap the season up with, I believe, the New Orleans Saints. No, the Carolina Panthers, because Buccaneers played the Panthers this weekend. Washington ends the season by playing the Cowboys in Week 18. The Cowboys, of course, have been eliminated. And if Washington takes care of business on Sunday night against the Falcons, they could probably rest Jaden Daniels and their starters in this game and probably get the Cowboys an easy win if that's the case. But like I said, they can win on Sunday night if they clinch it. If they win, they can clinch a wild card spot if they win on Sunday night against the Falcons. Tampa Bay, like I said, they're going to need help, especially with Atlanta leading the NFC South in terms of the division. The sweep record that they have against Tampa Bay is against them. But Carolina they play Carolina, and then they play the New Orleans Saints, 2 teams that are not very good. So Tampa Bay could easily win those games, and it really is going to come down to the wire with this one because I think because of the fact that the Falcons have the tiebreaker over the Buccaneers, they do have the upper hand. So Tampa Bay needs to hope that Atlanta loses one of its next 2 games to give them the chance to move up there. Because if what I think is going to happen on Sunday against the Falcons and Commanders happens, Tampa Bay would have a pretty good chance of making it back into the division lead once again. But like I said, it's just going to depend on how these teams play it out here. Seattle, I think, has a tough stretch ahead, especially with the Rams ahead of them. And like I said, I think they will beat Chicago, but there's that chance that they could not, and it could lead to the Rams essentially be able to clinch on Saturday night. But in terms of what could happen with the Week 18 primetime matchups, because you now got the 2 Saturday games on ABC and ESPN, and then you've got the Sunday Night Football game in Week 18. If I had to say right now what I think is going to happen, it's going to come down to 4 potential matchups, 2 each in the AFC, in each conference. In the AFC, I think it's going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cincinnati Bengals being one of those Saturday games. I think Kansas City and Denver, depending on what happens tomorrow against the Steelers and Chiefs, I think that opens I think if the Steelers win that game and the Chiefs lose, it opens the door for that Chiefs Broncos game to essentially take over what could be the Steelers and what could have been the Steelers and Bengals. It could come down to one of those 2 in particular, but I got a feeling one of those 2 games will be the Saturday doubleheader, or maybe both of those games might be the Saturday doubleheader if it gets to that point. But now, in terms of the NFC, the 2 matchups I think will be the big primetime matchups, either on ABC or NBC. It will be between the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings for the 1 seed. I think that's pretty much a guarantee to be the Sunday Night Football Week 18 matchup to end the regular season on. But then the Rams and the Seahawks. Where is that game? That could be a game that could be the latter half of the doubleheader on Saturday. So, yeah, those are the 4 matchups I think will be a primetime matchup in Week 18, whether it's the part of the Saturday doubleheader or the Sunday Night Football finale. So let's just go ahead and take a look and see what happens here if we go with my predictions from Week 17, and let's just play around with Week 18 for the NFC. Let's assume that the Seattle Seahawks beat the Rams. And let's see what happens if we do this. Again, I'm doing this on playoff predictors. So the matchups in the NFC would be the Green Bay Packers and the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams would still win the division regardless. Minnesota versus Tampa Bay, Washington and Philadelphia. Now let's see what happens if let's see if Atlanta loses a game. Let's see if Tampa Bay loses. Let's do that. Let's experiment with that. So let's say New Orleans beats Tampa Bay in the final week of the season. And this is what the away matchups would look like. Green Bay at Atlanta. Minnesota would go to LA. Washington would go to Philadelphia. So the last one doesn't really change all that much if that happens there. Now, if Tampa Bay wins, it's Green Bay and Tampa Bay, then Minnesota at LA, Washington at the Eagles. Let's go ahead and let's see what happens now if the Minnesota Vikings beat the Detroit Lions. Let's see what happens there. So now the NFC matchup is the Minnesota Vikings versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then the Green Bay Packers would go to LA to take on the Rams. Washington and Detroit Philadelphia wouldn't change, and Detroit would still be the number 1 team in the number 1 seed in the NFC because of the better divisional record. And one more here. Let's see what happens what do I want to do here? Let's see what happens if Carolina beats Atlanta. Let's see what happens with the playoff picture in general if that happens. So nothing really is. So we have a battle of the Bay, Green Bay and Tampa Bay, Minnesota, LA, Washington, Philadelphia. So nothing really changes in terms of the NFC, depending on what happens in the finale. If everything goes according to like I think it will, let's assume that Washington's already clinched the playoff spot. They don't have to worry about anything in terms of playoff positioning. I don't think it really changes the whole dynamic here. Let me see. Yeah, it doesn't really change anything. It's still Washington and Philadelphia, Minnesota and LA, Green Bay and Tampa Bay. But yeah, so there you go. Those are what would happen, or what's likely going to happen in Week 18. Like I said before, 4 matchups I think will be the primetime matchups for the Saturday doubleheader or the Sunday Night Football game. Steelers and Bengals, Chiefs and Broncos, depending on what happens tomorrow. Seahawks and Rams, Minnesota at Detroit. I think Minnesota and Detroit is a guaranteed lock for the Sunday Night Football game with the number 1 seed on the line. But Then again, we'll wait to see what happens. We'll see what transpires there. Seattle and Los Angeles could end up being the ones the Sunday night game if Detroit is able to win out and Minnesota does lose to Green Bay like I predict. But again, we'll wait to see what happens. But with all of that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the NFL Network. Now watch this be the week where I get everything completely wrong and the whole thing just completely falls apart in the end. But my plan is to do another show next week, of course, for the NFL Network. And then for Week 18, this might be a special thing. It's with the last Sunday of the regular season and with the potential playoff implications on the line. I am thinking about doing a live rewatch of Week 18. I'll be cutting in to give you score updates throughout the course of the day, and then that'll be the episode for the Reviewing Network Live. I haven't decided if that's going to be the case yet, but we'll see what happens there. But in the meantime, thank you guys so much for watching and listening to this. If you like what you saw and you want to see more of it, please go ahead and check out the last episode I did and the playlist below. Have a Merry Christmas. Have a happy holiday season. Happy Hanukkah. Happy Kwanzaa. Whatever you celebrate. Enjoy it. Have a great holiday. We'll see you next week for the last NFL Network of 2024 and the regular season before we move on to the playoffs. So, with all that said, thanks for watching and listening, and I'll see you guys next time.